They said I was lucky to sleep on the floor, as if being treated like a burden in the home I paid for was some kind of blessing. While they stepped over me with their clean shoes and dirty hearts, I kept count of every insult, every shove, every lie. And when they laughed behind my back, they had no idea I was making a plan, one that would cost them every inch of comfort they ever stole from me. You'd be amazed what people will do once they think you're powerless. They don't hide their cruelty. They don't whisper their plans. They don't even lower their voices when they say things like, "She'll be gone soon anyway." I wasn't supposed to hear that one. But when you sleep on the floor by the kitchen door, you hear everything. I'm 75 years old. My name is Margaret Hastings, and once upon a time, I owned this house. I picked the daffodils that still bloom by the fence. I scrubbed the kitchen tiles until they sparkled. I rocked my grandson, Ethan, to sleep in the same room, where they now toss empty beer cans and leave takeout boxes half-eaten on my old wooden table. Now I sleep on a thin mattress that I roll out next to the washing machine. There's no privacy. Not even a curtain. The hum of the fridge is my lullaby, and the kitchen light flicking on at 2 a.m. when someone gets a snack is my sunrise. They say I'm lucky. My daughter-in-law, Krista, smirks when she says it. You've got a roof over your head. You know how many people your age are in nursing homes. You should be grateful we let you stay. Let me stay. I bought this house with my late husband, Richard, when Krista was still in diapers. We lived here for 38 years. After Richard died, I let my son Derek and his new wife move in. Just for a while, I said. Just until they got on their feet. That was 10 years ago. Somehow, just for a while became, we're on the deed now. And suddenly my furniture was being updated. My things were being donated. And my room, was repainted in gray and turned into an office. Derek said it was just more practical, that I didn't need a whole room to myself when the laundry room was perfectly cozy. That's how they put me by the water heater. At first I believed it would pass, that they were just overwhelmed with bills and new jobs, and their precious Ethan. And once things settled, I'd get my space back. But things didn't settle. They just got more comfortable, more entitled. Krista stopped knocking when she entered. Derek stopped calling me Mom. Now it was just Margaret. Ethan, now 17, barely looked at me anymore, unless he wanted a ride or money. And I stopped speaking up. I'm not sure when it happened. Somewhere between the third time they threw out my groceries without asking, and the morning I woke up to find my knitting needles snapped in half, like twigs. I realized they were never going to give me my dignity back. I had to take it. It began the morning Krista had one of her charity brunches. That's what she calls them. Little get-togethers with her high society friends, where they wear floral dresses and pretend they're too busy for real life. I was crouched beside the dryer folding my cardigan, a soft sage green one I found in a thrift store last year. One of the few things that still feels like mine. I heard her voice drift through the house, too sharp for someone trying to sound sweet. She's still here. Can you believe that? Sleeping on the floor like some feral cat. But you know, she insists. Says she loves being close to the heartbeat of the home. Isn't that pathetic? There was laughter. I heard champagne glasses clink. My hands trembled. I felt it in my chest, like a kettle beginning to boil. But I didn't storm in. I didn't shout or cry or beg. I just smiled. Because in that moment, I remembered something Richard used to say. When people forget your value, remind them by showing what they lost. That night, after the guests left and the house went quiet, I pulled the old metal box out from under the dryer. It was dented and dusty, but the lock still clicked open. Inside were papers, deed copies, bank statements, a notarized agreement from 15 years ago that Richard and I had drawn up when we were thinking about retirement, one that outlined the trust he'd set aside in my name. Not Derek's. Krista always assumed the house was in Derek's name now. They'd filed paperwork to refinance the mortgage, thinking my signature was meaningless, but they never read the fine print. They never knew about the clause. Richard added, the one that said if I ever moved out, or was forced out, I'd receive full ownership again. It was ironclad. They just never imagined I'd read it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the laundry corner, hands shaking slightly, staring at the words. I wasn't mad. I was ready. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved in silence. I didn't change my routine. I folded laundry. I watered the daffodils. I handed Krista her purse when she left for her yoga class, and smiled when Derek asked if I'd picked up Ethan from school. But every night, once they were asleep, I made calls, quiet ones, to lawyers, to the county recorder's office, to a friend Richard once trusted, a man named George who specialized in property law. By the 3rd week, everything was in motion, and Krista? She had no idea. One afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch, sipping tea when she came out in her crisp little blouse and fake pearl. You mind picking up Ethan from school today? I'm booked solid, she said without making eye contact. I nodded, calm. Of course. Wouldn't want him to feel forgotten. She didn't catch the tone. They never do when they think you're harmless. But Ethan didn't speak on the ride home. Not much, just stared at his phone. I glanced at him once at a stoplight. That messy brown hair, the jawline getting sharper, the hint of acne he was trying to cover with tinted moisturizer. He used to run to me, hug me, so hard I thought my ribs would crack. He used to call me Mimi and beg for stories. Now I was just the driver. Still, as we pulled into the driveway, he mumbled something under his breath. Wish we had space. My friends all have game rooms. And we don't even have a guest room. I smiled softly. Maybe one day you'll appreciate the roof over your head. He scoffed. Yeah, thanks to Dad. Not like you did anything. That stung. It always does, even when you're expecting it. But I just parked the car, handed him his backpack, and said nothing. Because I knew something he didn't. I knew that in 13 days, I'd own this house again. Legally and entirely. The documents were already being finalized. And in 14 days, they'd receive the first notice of change, rent terms, occupancy conditions, lease deadlines. And by the end of the month, they'd be the ones sleeping on cold, unfamiliar floors, not me. I won't raise my voice. I won't throw a tantrum or demand apologies. I'll do something far worse. I'll give them a taste of exactly how lucky they were to have me here at all. And it's only just beginning. The day the envelope arrived, I made blueberry muffins. Not because I wanted to celebrate, not because I was in the mood to bake, but because I knew the smell of something sweet would draw them into the kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd quietly placed the manila envelope with crisp, fresh papers inside, right on the counter. Centered. Unmissable. The scent of sugar and butter wrapped around the house like a ribbon. I sat in my usual spot by the laundry closet, wearing my dusty rose cardigan, the one Krista once said made me look like an old bathroom rug. I wore it anyway, and I looked good in it. That morning, I brushed my silver hair into a neat twist, dabbed a little tinted balm on my lips, and waited. It didn't take long. Krista waltzed in first, wearing a silky cream blouse and yoga pants that looked like they'd never seen a lunge in their life. Her hair was tied into a high ponytail, and she was already on her Bluetooth headset talking to someone. Probably one of her brand partners. She barely looked at me. Then she saw the envelope. Her voice dipped an octave. Hold on, Melanie. Yeah. Something just came in the mail. I don't know what this is. She picked it up like it might bite her. I watched her face as she flipped it open, and there it was. The shift, the slow freeze behind her eyes, the way her lips parted and pressed back together like she was trying to keep the panic inside. She didn't speak. Not to me. Not to her friend on the phone. She just turned and walked briskly out of the kitchen. A minute later, I heard her calling Derek's name upstairs. I didn't move. I just reached for a muffin, broke off a steaming piece, and let the blueberries melt in my mouth. It was a good day. The papers were simple. A formal notice of transfer, legally reinstating my ownership of the house, effective immediately. George had done a brilliant job. Everything airtight, signed and recorded with the county. I'd even included a polite, professional letter explaining that continued residence by Derek, Krista, and Ethan would require a new lease agreement under adjusted market rent. In other words, pay up or pack. I didn't see Derek until later that evening. He came home around 7:30, stomping through the door like a child. His face was flushed red, neck stiff. He didn't look at me as he stormed past, but I heard the muffled yelling in the hallway. "Are you kidding me, Krista? You said she was done. You said she couldn't do anything anymore." I could have laughed. But instead I quietly got up, folded the laundry I'd been sorting, and walked into the living room like I didn't hear a thing. Krista was pacing, barefoot, still holding the documents like they were poison. Derek finally looked at me. His mouth opened, then closed again. His nostrils flared. For a moment I saw my little boy in him, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees and tears in his eyes. But that boy was long gone. "You went behind our backs," he snapped. "You did this to punish us." I kept my voice soft. "I did this to protect myself." He scoffed. "You didn't even talk to us first. You just took the house." "Took?" I raised my eyebrows. "Sweetheart, I gave you 10 years. 10 years of patience, of grace, of being stepped over and dismissed and shoved into corners. I didn't take anything. I just stopped giving." Krista crossed her arms. "You know we can't afford this. Rent? Are you serious? We're family. Family doesn't treat people like clutter," I replied. She opened her mouth again, but I held up a hand. "I'll give you 30 days, I said. "That's more than generous. After that you can sign the lease at the new rate, or you can move. Your choice." Derek looked like he might explode, but Krista pulled him back with a hand on his chest. "We'll fight this," she said. "You think some dusty old documents are going to hold up? We'll find a way to reverse this. You think you're smart?" "I don't think I'm smart," I said, voice calm. "I know you didn't read a single page your father had you sign when he was alive. He protected me more than either of you ever have. That's what's holding up." I walked back to my corner without another word. For the next few days, things got quiet. Too quiet. Krista stopped asking me to do chores. Derek avoided me altogether. Ethan barely said a word when I handed him his lunch before school. I could feel it in the air. They were stewing, plotting, trying to find an angle. What they didn't know was that I'd already thought of everything. They had no leverage. They'd forged ahead for years under the assumption I'd die quietly in the background. They never expected I'd outlive their arrogance. And I wasn't finished yet. The next week I hosted a visitor, the new property manager I'd hired. Her name was Casey. Young, sharp, and wickedly smart. She wore a slate gray blazer and had a clipboard filled with paperwork. I introduced her in the living room like we were filming a sitcom. "Derek, Krista," I said brightly. "This is Casey. She'll be handling the lease terms, maintenance requests, and inspections moving forward." "In inspections?" Derek choked. Krista looked like someone had slapped her with a stack of overdue bills. You're turning this into a rental property." "I'm turning it into what it already is," I said. Only now it's formal. If you want to stay, you'll need to sign. If not, you'll need to leave. Derek stared at me, stunned. We're your family, and I was yours, until you turned me into a floor mat. Casey handed them both tenant applications and rent adjustment notices. Market value had gone up, and I made sure they'd feel it. When they realized what the monthly amount was, Krista nearly dropped the paper. "This is robbery," she hissed. "No," I said. "This is reality. Maybe next time you won't tell someone who built this house they're lucky just to sleep on the floor." That night I found Krista crying in the bathroom. The door wasn't fully closed. I heard her whispering through tears on the phone to her sister, saying things like, "She's lost it," and "We can't afford this place." But she never once said she was sorry. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't sad because they hurt me. They were sad because they couldn't keep using me. And I was just getting started. 2 days later, Casey emailed them their formal lease agreement. They had 2 weeks left to respond. During that time, I took joy in little things. Watching Krista scrub the floors for the first time in years. Seeing Derek cook dinner because we can't afford takeout. And the sound of Ethan slamming his bedroom door when the Wi-Fi cut out from non-payment. I didn't gloat, I didn't rub it in. I just went about my days, wearing my dusty rose cardigan, watering my daffodils, and sleeping peacefully in the guest room I'd reclaimed from the office they once shoved me out of. But the real surprise, it came the night before the lease deadline. I heard Derek and Krista arguing, loud, raw, and then Ethan knocked on my door. His face was pale, eyes rimmed red. I didn't know it was like this," he mumbled. I looked at him for a long moment. "Like what?" He looked down. "That you used to own all this, that they made you sleep on the floor." I just thought you wanted to." I raised an eyebrow. "Would you?" He shook his head. We sat in silence for a minute. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered. I believed him. But one apology wouldn't change what came next, because the next day, the clock would run out, and I was ready. The morning of the deadline was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence that creeps into a house like fog. No footsteps, no laughter, no TV playing too loud in the background. Just the steady ticking of the wall clock in the hallway, and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen table, wearing my soft sky blue cardigan over a cream blouse and beige slacks. I poured myself a cup of tea, the floral pattern on the cup catching the morning light from the window. The scent of Earl Grey curled through the air. I stirred it gently, waiting. Right on cue, a folded lease agreement slid across the table toward me. Untied. Derek stood at the edge of the table, arms crossed, jaw tight. Krista stood behind him, her lips pressed so thin they looked like they might disappear into her face. "We're not signing," he said flatly. I sipped my tea. "I see. We talked to a lawyer," Krista added. "He says this is heartless, and he's right." I looked up, meeting her eyes. "Heartless?" I said. "Heartless is letting your mother sleep on a linoleum floor, while you and your wife turn her home into a personal playground." Derek's hands clenched. "You're doing this to punish us." "No," I said softly. "I'm doing this to protect myself. And maybe, to remind you both that I'm not disposable." He opened his mouth to argue, but I stood up slowly and slid the paper back toward them. "Well then," I said. "You've made your choice." Krista blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean you'll need to vacate the property within 7 days. That was in the original notice." "You can't," she started. "I can," I cut in, voice steady. "And I have." The room was still. Derek's face paled as the weight of it finally sank in. They had assumed I was bluffing, that I'd fold, that I'd break the way they always expected me to. But I didn't blink. I simply turned, walked out of the kitchen, and closed the door to my newly reclaimed guest room. For the next few days, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Boxes started piling up near the front door. I heard raised voices at night. Krista's bitter, Derek's angry, Ethan's exhausted. And through it all, I stayed still. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. I had given them years. They had given me nothing but dismissal in return. I would not bend again. On the fourth day, Krista came knocking on my door. I opened it slowly. She stood there, makeup smudged, her once perfect ponytail hanging limp. She looked smaller now, not physically, just deflated. "I know you hate me," she said. I didn't respond. "I know I've said terrible things. I've treated you horribly. But please, don't make us leave." I studied her. Part of me wanted to feel pity. Part of me wanted to forgive. But the bigger part, the wiser part, it remembered every night I'd pulled a blanket over myself on the floor while she laughed in the next room. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "But I don't trust you, and I won't give you another chance to walk all over me." She looked like she wanted to say more, but the words didn't come. She left without a fight. That night, I made a list. A real one, not just in my head, on paper. I wrote down what I needed to do to turn this house back into what it once was. New locks, deep clean, refinish the guest room, remove Derek's office junk, bring in a tenant for the upstairs. That last one made me pause. Yes, I was going to rent the upstairs, not to strangers but to someone who needed it. A widow perhaps, a young single mother, someone like me who had been told they were lucky to be treated poorly, because I had no intention of living in silence and bitterness. I wasn't just removing the rot, I was making space for something better. By the sixth day, the moving truck pulled up. Ethan didn't say goodbye. I saw him slump into the back seat of Derek's car, earbuds in, hoodie over his head. Krista walked out with her chin raised high, pretending not to see me. But Derek, he lingered on the porch. He looked around at the daffodils, the porch swing, the little cracked stepping stone, with Ethan's toddler handprint still pressed into it. He turned to me. "This used to be home," he said. "You know that?" "It still is," I said. "You just forgot whose it was." He nodded slowly. "You're never gonna forgive me, are you?" I shrugged. "Some things are better learned than forgiven." He didn't reply. He just walked down the steps, climbed into the car and drove away. The silence they left behind felt like fresh air. That night, I danced barefoot in the kitchen. The moonlight spilled across the tile floor, silver and cool, and I moved slowly to an old song playing on the radio. My cardigan swayed around me. I caught my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, wrinkles etched like stories, and a strength I'd nearly forgotten I had. This was my home again, and it was only the beginning. The next morning I called Casey. "I want to list the upstairs unit," I said. She chuckled. "Ready to be a landlady, huh?" "I'm ready to be seen," I replied, "and to choose who gets to share this space with me." 2 weeks later, a young woman named Carla moved in. She was 29, worked 2 jobs, and had just gotten out of a messy situation with her ex. She cried the first time she saw the room. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I've never had my own space before." I knew that feeling all too well. We sat on the porch that evening with tea and warm apple bread, and for the first time in years, someone asked me how I was doing, and meant it. She didn't step over me. She didn't sigh when I spoke. She listened, and in that moment, I realized This revenge wasn't about punishment, it was about restoration. I wasn't just reclaiming a house, I was reclaiming myself, my worth, my voice, my peace. And as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned gold, I smiled, not because I won, but because I remembered who I was all along. Some mornings now I wake before the sun, not because of the creaking pipes, or Derek stomping down the stair, not because someone's rummaging through the fridge at midnight or slamming a cabinet next to my bed. No. Now I rise because I want to, because the house is finally quiet, in the right way, peaceful, still, mine. I pull on my maroon cardigan, still warm from the dryer, and step out onto the front porch. The wood groans gently under my feet, the same porch Richard built, plank by plank, 40 years ago. The daffodils are just starting to bloom again, brighter this year somehow. Maybe it's the sunlight, maybe it's the absence of their shadows. Inside, Carla is just waking up. I hear her footsteps above, light, respectful. She never slams doors. She always says thank you when I bring up extra towels or share a batch of cookies. She asks about my day. She even started calling me Miss Margaret. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone addressed me with warmth, with care. It's funny, they used to call me Lucky. But I've never felt luckier than I do right now. Still, revenge has a way of leaving echoes behind. You don't always get to choose what they sound like. The first echo came in the form of a letter. No envelope, just a folded note. Slipped through the screen door late one evening. It was Ethan's handwriting. Messy, hurried, but unmistakable. I know I didn't see what was happening. I thought you were just being dramatic. But I see it now. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you don't hate me. I'm sorry. I sat with that letter for a long time. Read it twice, then 3 times. He wasn't a cruel boy. Just impressionable. Immature. He took cues from his parents, and I suppose in some ways, I enabled that. I let too much slide. I said it's fine too often when it wasn't. I smiled when I should have spoken. I gave when I should have withheld. But I didn't hate him. In fact, that little piece of honesty, that note, meant more to me than anything I'd heard from Derek or Krista in the past 10 years. So I wrote back, I don't hate you, Ethan. I just hope you grow up to be better than they taught you to be. Mimi. I didn't expect him to reply, he didn't, and that's all right. Some things are better left to bloom slowly, on their own time. Instead, I focused on rebuilding what they tore down, not just in the house, but in me. I repainted the kitchen, got rid of the dull grays Krista insisted were modern. I chose soft yellows and light sage colors that felt like morning. I replaced the chairs they'd cracked and scratched, polished the dining table until I could see my reflection again. And for the first time since Richard passed, I opened the old photo albums. I cried over them, tears for what was lost, for what I allowed to be stripped away, for the woman who thought silence would be enough to survive in her own home. And then, one morning, something happened. I didn't expect. Krista came back. I was pruning the rose bushes, near the mailbox, when a white SUV pulled into the drive. For a second, I thought it might be a delivery, but then she stepped out, hair pulled back, no makeup, a plain gray hoodie over jeans. Her posture was different, smaller, no heels, no sunglasses, no smirk, just Krista. She walked slowly toward the porch. I didn't say a word, I just watched. I'm not here to fight, she said. I just needed to talk. I nodded once and gestured toward the porch swing. We sat in silence for a full minute. The breeze carried the scent of fresh soil and lilacs. Birds chirped somewhere in the neighbor's tree. Then she spoke. I lost my job, she said. 2 weeks after we left. I think I was too distracted, too bitter, said the wrong things in the wrong meeting. I listened. Derek's working long hours. Ethan barely speaks to us, and I keep thinking about the last few years and wondering, her voice broke, wondering how I let it get that bad. Still I said nothing. I was cruel to you, she whispered. Unforgivable, probably. But I needed to say it out loud. I needed to stop pretending you were just being overdramatic or difficult. You weren't. You were surviving. I looked down at my hands. The skin thinner now, veins visible but still strong. I don't need an apology, I said quietly. What I needed was respect. You knew how to give it to strangers. You just couldn't give it to me. She nodded, and then she cried. Not pretty tears, not polite sniffles. She sobbed, shoulders shaking, hands trembling, and I let her. I didn't hug her, I didn't comfort her, but I didn't walk away either. When she finally looked up, she wiped her face with her sleeve. I don't expect you to trust me again, but if there's anything I can do. There is, I said. She blinked. What? Be better to Ethan. Break the cycle. Let him grow into a man who sees people not just what they can do for him. She nodded. Eyes red. Voice hoarse. I will. She stood, paused, then walked back to her car. I haven't seen her since. But that conversation, it lifted something. Not forgiveness. Not quite. But release. The last of the resentment cracked like old paint. And underneath, I found something softer than I expected. Peace. Now I spend my days tending the garden, hosting tea with Carla upstairs, and helping out at the local community center a few days a week. I started knitting again, too, this time in the living room, on my own couch, with the lamp turned just how I like it. I even joined a book club. They meet every Thursday in my sunroom. I laugh now, loud, without worrying who hears me. This house isn't just four walls. It's my resurrection. They thought they buried me in the corner, but I was just taking root. I was sweeping the front porch one warm spring morning when I saw Ethan again. It had been over 2 months since the eviction. 2 months of no yelling through the walls. No Krista's perfume choking the kitchen. No Derek muttering complaints when the garbage bags weren't tied his way. In that quiet, the house healed. So did I. I wore my deep olive green cardigan that day. The one I kept hidden in a trunk for years, because Krista once called it frumpy. Funny how something becomes beautiful again, when no one's tearing it apart. The porch boards creaked, and I looked up. Ethan was taller now. Not physically, but in how he carried himself. No hoodie pulled over his eyes this time. Just jeans, a button down, and a nervous look on his face. Hey Mimi. My throat caught for a moment. That name, I hadn't heard it since before he started treating me like wallpaper. Hello, Ethan. He shifted awkwardly. His hair was shorter than before, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Do you mind if I talk for a minute? I nodded slowly and leaned the broom against the railing. He sat on the steps, like he used to when he was little, and I'd hand him lemon cookies, wrapped in napkins. I sat beside him, the wood warm from the morning sun. I've been thinking a lot, he said, about how things went down, and about you. I stayed quiet. He looked straight ahead, not at me. Dad's angry, says you turned on us, but I don't think you did. I think you just got tired of being ignored. I exhaled slow. That's exactly right, he swallowed hard. I was a jerk. I thought you were just being difficult, always making little comments. But now that I'm living in a crammed apartment with my parents yelling every night, I get it. I studied him carefully. There wasn't an apology in those words yet. Not fully, but there was something closer to truth than I'd ever heard from him before. You were raised in a house where no one was taught how to listen, I said. That's not your fault. But what you do next, that's all on you. He nodded. I want to do better. For real, I looked at him. 17, almost grown, still trying to find his place. I saw pieces of Derek in him, but I also saw sparks of Richard. The gentleness, the wondering eyes. You can visit, I said, but not to drop off guilt or take something. You come here if you want to help me plant herbs or bake or talk about school. I don't need your apologies. I need your effort. He smiled. Deal. And just like that, the porch didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like spring. The next few weeks passed in small, meaningful ways. Ethan came by once a week. Sometimes he helped pull weeds. Sometimes he brought me books from the library or asked about recipes. He never stayed too long, but he always left better than he arrived. Meanwhile, upstairs, Carla had begun to settle in beautifully. She started hosting little gatherings. Nothing wild, just her coworkers or a cousin for dinner. She always invited me, and I always brought dessert. Laughter began filling corners of the house that hadn't heard joy in years, and with joy came more change. One afternoon, Carla came downstairs holding a stack of papers. Miss Margaret, she said, eyes wide. Do you know what this is? She handed me a certificate, a property award from the city for maintaining historic homes. I blinked. Where did you get this? In the attic. It had your name on it. From 1989. I ran my fingers across the gold seal. Faded but still glowing. I had forgotten all about it. Back then, Richard and I had spent months restoring the crown molding, repainting the porch posts, and planting the dogwoods by the sidewalk. Someone had nominated us for the city award, and we'd won. Now here it was again, in my hands, after being buried under boxes and dust and years of disrespect. Carla grinned. You should reapply. I raised an eyebrow. Reapply? They reopened the historic registry. You're eligible again. You just need to do a few updates. And I can help. For the first time in a long time, I felt something spark. Not just peace, but purpose. We began the process that week. Together, Carla and I stripped old wallpaper. We repainted crown molding, resealed the porch steps, and even retiled the upstairs bathroom. I taught her how to patch drywall, and she showed me how to submit the application online. The house came back to life. Not just structurally, spiritually. Neighbors who had ignored me for years started waving again. A local reporter stopped by for photos. Casey, my trusty property manager, called to say we were being listed for an upcoming spotlight in the city newsletter. They're calling you the comeback queen. She laughed. I didn't need the title, but I'll admit, it felt good. One morning while polishing the doorframe, I found a carved heart near the baseboard. I crouched down, tracing it with my fingers. Inside the heart were two sets of initials, Bar M, Richard and Margaret. I hadn't known he carved it there. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from something deeper. Gratitude, memory. He had built this house with love, and now I had reclaimed it with strength. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail from the city's Historic Home Council. Thick envelope, embossed seal. We had been accepted. Our house, my house, was now a protected home, eligible for grants, recognition, and city support. I framed the certificate and placed it in the hallway, right above the spot where I used to sleep on the floor. Not out of spite, but as a reminder that sometimes you have to go low before you can rise. That night I lit a single candle in the kitchen. Carla and I toasted with ginger ale in fancy glasses, and Ethan stopped by just in time to share a slice of homemade peach cobbler. He looked around, eyes wide. "It's beautiful now," I smiled. "It always was, people just couldn't see it." He nodded slowly. "That's kinda like you, huh?" I chuckled. "Exactly like me. They don't tell you how quiet justice is. You expect fireworks, loud, angry storms, maybe even applause. But the truth is, when justice finally settles into your bones, it's soft, it's steady. It's peace with a pulse." It had been 4 months since Derek, Krista, and Ethan moved out. 4 months since I reclaimed the deed. Since I took the broom and the keys, and every shred of dignity they said I was too lucky to still have. And this morning, as I buttoned my soft mustard yellow cardigan, the final letter arrived. A neat envelope. Official county seal. Inside was confirmation the historic property grant had gone through. They were awarding the house $25,000 in improvement funding. Not a loan, a gift, in honor of the home's original builders and its current owner's unwavering commitment to preservation and resilience. I stared at that line for a long time. Resilience. For years, that word had felt like a punishment. A code for you'll suffer quietly and keep smiling. But now it felt like a badge. I stood in front of the mirror in the hallway. The same hallway where I once curled up on the cold floor beside the washer. Where Krista used to say, "She likes it there, makes her feel useful." Now framed photos lined the walls. My wedding picture, baby Derek before the bitterness. Even a photo Carla took of me standing by the daffodils with a coffee mug in hand. I looked content, not young, not unwrinkled, but strong. The front door creaked open just before noon. Carla stepped in with a bag of groceries and a grin. "Guess what? The grant paperwork went through on my end, too. We're good to go for the front garden expansion." We high-fived. A real one, loud and clumsy and joyful. And she added, "I spoke to the woman from the community center. She said your story's been going around town. They want to feature you in the local seniors newsletter." I laughed. "They'll run out of ink printing my whole story." Carla winked. "Then we'll give them a new chapter." It hit me then. How much life I still had left. How much love I'd buried beneath other people's needs. How many days I spent waiting for someone to invite me into the space I'd built with my own hands. Never again. I walk freely now. I cook in my kitchen. I rest in my bedroom. I speak without flinching. I hum while I sweep. And when I sit on the porch with a cup of tea, I no longer wonder if I'm in the way. I know I belong. Ethan still visits. Not every week, but often enough to let me know he's trying. Last Saturday, he brought me a potted fern and helped paint the shed door. His eyes don't dart around nervously anymore. He's more grounded now, a little more aware of how words carry weight. "Can I ask you something?" he said, as we cleaned the brushes. "Of course. Would you have still kicked us out if we had apologized sooner?" I paused. "No," I said honestly. "If your parents had treated me like a person instead of a placeholder, they'd still be here." I didn't want revenge, Ethan. I wanted respect. He nodded, quiet. "I get that now." That was enough for me. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the house glowed gold from within, I walked out into the yard and turned on the porch light. The same light Krista used to forget to turn on for me when I came home from the store in the dark. Now, it shined for me, and anyone who walked through my door with love and decency. I stood under that porch light, took a breath, and finally exhaled all the years I had swallowed whole. This house, It wasn't just wood and nails. It was the proof that I had endured, outlasted, and risen higher than their judgment ever allowed. Krista once called me lucky. She had no idea how right she was. Lucky to have strength that doesn't scream but builds. Lucky to have a spine that doesn't bend for cruelty. Lucky to survive betrayal and turn it into blueprints for something better. This isn't a story about getting even, it's a story about getting free, and freedom, I've learned, is best served in silence. When they look back and realize the foundation they stood on was me, and I took it with me when I left the floor and reclaimed the whole damn house.